We'll begin taking a look at a few others, starting with Kit Harrington. Now, I'm not going to be looking extensively into all of these people, and as always would recommend you do your own research, watch them in motion, listen to them, find candid shots, and make your own assessments. At a glance, Kit doesn't look overwhelmingly feminine, though in my opinion next to Jason Momoa, the person looks softer and definitely lacks the male presence of Momoa. I think Kit might be having a harder time of this, which no one can fault him for since he's a biological female and Momoa is massive. I have no idea if Jason Momoa and Emilia Clarke or other biological males and females in the media know that their co-stars are inverted. Some of them truly might be ignorant of this and used as unwitting puppets in the agenda of androgyny and depravity. As far as Kit goes, I am immediately struck by the lost, dead FTM look in this person's eyes. There's a small mouth, there's softness to the face, there's small, even features. There's a widow's peak, which is more common on females, not restricted to them, but more common. And there is a short neck. All of these traits are female. As for the traits developed by administered testosterone, it seems the brow ridges, the cheekbones, the lower portion of the face, and the nose all may have been expanded or extended a bit, which are known effects of taking testosterone. The Adam's apple developed to a small degree, and facial hair grew. Often FTMs don't grow very convincing beards, and often they don't seem to grow any right below the lips there. But that doesn't happen in every case. Sometimes they have very convincing beards. The shoulders look small, and I can't see any collarbones here, which you'd typically see on a slim male like this, as males have lower levels of subcutaneous body fat, which makes their bones, which also tend to be bigger, more visible. Mighty curvy thighs there. There are curves on both sides. The crotch to palm level is in order for a Caucasian female. Looks like the hip joints are equal to the shoulder joints. That pelvis is sure wide. There's plenty of room in there for bearing children. That is absolutely a female Q angle on both sides. Very obvious. It's a wide pelvis. The feet are stepping one in front of the other, as is typical of female stride. It's an undeniable female Q angle and hips. One arm is swinging in front of the body, but the hips expand on both sides, and the arm angles out at the other side. There is curve visible on both sides of the knee, showing the curved legs are at a skeletal level. The round hips shape all the way from the high waist indentation points down to the widest point at crotch level. This FTM doesn't have a highly abnormal look to the chest, unlike some, but something is off. Just a little bit, there's something kind of weirdly droopy right around the corner here. It's a bit odd. It might be pectoral implants that are kind of filling out the shape into a more square appearance, but it looks a bit weird still. There's the fake Adonis belt, which might have been through liposculpture or some other technique to implant that kind of shape in there. There's a gradual curve to the lower legs. The knees look actually quite soft. That is a mighty curvy spine there. And definite pelvic tilt. There's longer legs on a proportionally shorter torso. There is roundness and width to those hips. See that Q angle? Wow, that is definitely a female Q angle. Also, the feet look quite small. After seeing the curved spine without clothing, one can account for the shape through it. You can tell it comes in like that at a high point, goes back out again. Pretty short torso. See, the trousers are worn low, halfway down the posterior, while the shoulders are slouched forward and the pelvis is tilted forward to try and minimize the appearance of the spinal arch. I think this one probably knows what they are doing. The hands and wrists look pretty small. The person is leaning so far back to make up for the spinal arch. See that incredible backward leaning pose? Be aware of posing and camera angles in polished productions like this. I'm assuming this was maybe from Game of Thrones, I don't know. But be aware of the fact that in actual polished productions like TV series and films and things, they will be shooting from specific angles, they will be posing, they will be using lighting, they'll be doing everything they can to conceal these skeletal traits you can still pick them out if you watch enough things and account for these angles and everything, all these tricks. If you find candid shots of them, that's great, but just be aware they're going to be doing things like this. And also, you know, who knows when they're using body doubles in Polish productions as well. And here with his wife, assuming they're still married, is Rose Leslie. See how his hips are just huge and round? There's the width of the pelvis, you can tell it's very wide at this high point, the short female torso, the curvy long legs. And then the wife is the one with the thicker, longer neck, the body that stands straight as a pole, unlike his that's kind of tilted, which is usually seen on females with spinal arches. Rose has more spaces between the facial features than Kit, as well as thinner lips, wider open eyes, more prominent, squarer facial bones, and a longer neck. There's mild energy from Kit and a more projected energy from Rose. Now, this is just my opinion, but poor Kit looks simultaneously quite terrified and catatonic in this shot, and I'm not entirely convinced by Rose's ferocious grimace. Maybe that's just normal for a stressful day of wedding photography or an actual wedding, or maybe deep down they're thinking about what they're doing with a man becoming bride and a woman becoming groom. Tendons and bones sticking out all over the place on Rose. The bosom looks displaced, it doesn't look natural. It's far too low. Rose's jaw is stronger, and the brow bone is more prominent, even though Kit does have something of one. His one is really odd looking though, it's more of a mass of tissue than the obvious bony one that you see on Rose. Rose does have small ears, but this is possible on males too. See here how Kit is just stepping normally, without intentionally placing his feet one in front of the other, the knees just held however, and his thighs angle inward, on both legs. While Rose is actually moving one knee intentionally in front of the other to create a similar look to her thighs. Plenty of MTFs know and execute this trick using the catwalk to approximate the appearance of a Q angle through crossing their feet one past the other and increasing the visual slant of their legs in comparison to the ground. This is a very male face and a very male gaze. Very male demeanor. This is a narrow male pelvis, straight male legs, straight male torso, huge male jaw, wide-spaced wide eyes, gauntless to the cheeks, straight torso with long rib cage, no pelvic tilt whatsoever. It's a straight young boy's body. It's a loose dress, but it's still evident there is no spinal arch under there. Very long neck. Arms hanging straight from the shoulders. This is one of the modern types of MTF where the hormone blockers worked quite well, and so the result is a thin, prepubescent boy body with clearly male facial traits, but none of the really kind of bulky, obvious, mature male traits that you saw on some kind of previous types. Perhaps we could fit 3 skull widths on the shoulders, perhaps not. It's a small-framed person, a male that didn't develop to maturity. It does look like there is a male digit ratio, unsurprisingly. The hands are long, the neck is ridged, the face is masculine. Now, the estrogen has either worked in giving this person a more female fat distribution, or their managers have taken over and contoured the hips. But these are not natural female legs and hips. See how the foot is turned down here? And the knee is being pulled intentionally, one in front of the other? This is the MTF catwalk. The leg is not that curved on its own without all this contrived wiggling about. If you follow the lines of the knee and everything, there's not space in the pelvis, so the legs come down straight from there, which means on this side it should be going just straight up to here, which means this part here is not natural, it's fake. And then you have this intentional stepping with the foot bent out to the side, because it has to do that for balance. But natural women, this is not what they are doing with their joints when they're walking like this. See here, this bulge This is what I'm talking about, the contoured flesh. It remains just on the outside of the hips. That's really not normal. That's a fake contoured hip. There are only mild inclines down to that point on the male torso. It's just a thin tubular body, and then suddenly there's a hunk of flesh right here. But the legs themselves are totally straight. You just have this fake part on the side. It's not natural. There's not bone right under there, it's just a bulge. The pelvis is thinner. You can see where the pelvis is in there. Follow the line of the knee, noting that there's no curve on the inner edge. It's possible to see that the Q angle is in fact male. Legs are straight. Unlike Onkit, who does have a female Q angle. And see here, on Rose, it looks like the shoulders are still wider than the hips, even with the hips being constructed. The actual pelvis itself, see there's that bulge right here, but above here it's thin, it's narrow, it's much narrower than the shoulders. There's no curve on the inner thigh here because there's no space for it, because the male legs are closer together due to springing from narrower points on a narrower male pelvis. The person is very good at doing the catwalk in most shots. As for Amelia, she's kind of swerving about here, stepping in this direction, so we can't really judge what she's doing with her legs because it's not the same as if she was walking in a straight line. But even so, there's an obvious curve on the inner side of her knee that isn't caused by the catwalk, as on Rose. Amelia's mass is all low right here at the hips, while Rose has a long, long torso and then sudden false hips right there on otherwise straight legs. Kit's mass is mostly right here at the hips too. And the Q angle there is obviously feminine. He has his hands in his pockets, as FTMs often do, to try to disguise the hip width. And on to Lena Headey. The legs look too straight, the pelvis too narrow, compared to these wide, square shoulders to be female. The shoulders could fit 3 head sizes. The skull traits are clearly male. They're thin, bony ankles, though women usually have gradual curve to the ankle instead. The torso looks really long, even though the legs, they're increasing the general appearance of the leg length through using high heels, but still the torso seems to be the really long bit. The waist is really low as well. That's a strangely low waist for a female. Female waist should be higher up, about there, because a female ribcage is shorter and angles in, unlike the male ribcage, which is longer and straighter generally. That is a really big ribcage and a flat as a board spine. That looks like a very male posterior. There's no pelvic tilt or anything. That's definitely a male torso. The collarbones are very straight across on square shoulders, while most women have sloped shoulders. 3 head widths definitely could fit on these shoulders. The hips, if you follow the actual width of the pelvis in here, it's definitely narrower than where you have the joints in the shoulders up here. The arms hang straight down from the shoulders, evidencing that as well. Looks like we have an Adonis belt here, compared to wide hips that actually match the shoulder joints, to a visible female Q angle on both sides, to a gradual curve from a high waist. Very different looks, right? Long hanging male arms, the legs step side by side. The body looks very flat and square and male, with a long torso. The mass seems to be up here in the shoulders, in the torso, compared to obvious mass low at the hips, with longer legs proportionally. Now here the spine does look a bit bent, but this is likely a result of bad posture. Obviously the shoulders are slouched forward at least. And honestly, if a woman slouches her shoulders forward, the back is much smaller. I've seen a lot of MTFs do this, where they'll kind of slouch the shoulders forward, and if they do that we still see this big rib cage, and there's a huge kind of curve at the back for them, because males have larger backs, larger rib cages, but on females you just don't have that. So I think it doesn't seem like there's an actual tilt to the pelvis. There's a bit of a curve to the stomach, but the actual pelvis does appear to be pretty straight right here on both sides. Also, the point at which this back seems to curve a little bit is down here, really low, Whereas on a female, you'd have a back that wouldn't be going out so far. If she was standing straight, it would be kind of like this, come in right at a high point, that's where it would start to curve out. And here it's really low, so to me this looks like a boy with a sway back. This doesn't look like a natural female spinal arch. See what I mean here? The back is smaller, much smaller on a female. The arch is high. There's no slouching, the arch just exists even without any kind of slouching. And it comes in and it goes back out without posing, it's just there. On a real female. Here there are the low male hips without any roundness to them. Straight male legs. It does look like there's the Adonis belt here. No pelvic tilt, just a very straight body. The pelvis looks narrower than the shoulders, though the shoulders are kind of being scrunched up here. There's no really obvious waist indentation points. Waist seems to be at or below the navel, as often seen on males. Ribcage looks big and long. Q angle seems to begin really high, like you see on males. And Lena's upper lip is significantly smaller than the lower, while I usually see that women's lips are about equal in size to each other. The mouth itself is really wide, as is more common on males. There's significant gaps between the facial features, common on male skulls. The eyes are wide, they're also wide set. There are some brow ridges, prominent cheekbones, a square jaw. The second person on this poster was also apparently a character in Game of Thrones. Just like Lena Headey, Natalie Dormer has a broad skull, wide-spaced features, and prominent facial bones. They both seem to have widow's peaks, but a fair percentage of males in the world do, and it seems a lot of people in Hollywood, male and female and appearing as the inverse, do. Now, these people were forced transgendered from early childhood, and this is evidenced by their bodies that are male in skeletal structure, yet lack signs of full male maturation. Using such people, born males, twisted into females before they could even understand or consent, as faces to talk about violence against girls is kind of unbefitting. And yet, the words written on their faces still somehow apply to the abuse given them at the hands of trusted carers who forced them to live a lie, and obliterated their innate right to live as their true gender. Natalie Dormer is a slight person, but it also looks like the spine is very straight. That trachea, that thick neck, and that male Q angle. There's built up quadriceps muscle, but the Q angle itself is actually male, and the inner part of the thigh here is just straight up and down. Looks like the shoulders may be wider than the hips. Looks like the arms may be more like female length, not really long. But the skull is extremely masculine. See how on a real woman there's more curve to the thighs on both sides, inside and out, caused by the way the thigh bones come down to the knee from the pelvis at an acute angle. Both sides. Looks like Natalie Dormer has absolutely no pelvic tilt. The front and the back are both straight. Also, note how there's no width to the hips. Looks very narrow in that region compared to Amelia in a similar pose. See how much width there is to the hips here? Amelia is kind of tilting her pelvis forward a little, and yet it's obvious that her spine also tilts from this high waist point. You can see the obvious change in direction of the spine, just visually looking at it. Unlike what it looked like on Natalie. And on to Maisie Williams and Sophie Turner. At a glance, shoulders are wider than hips on both of them. Very square, big shoulders, and the pelvis is inside here, definitely smaller on both. Q angles are male and begin at a high point above the crotch, both of them. That's a pretty big rib cage for a small girl. There's no spinal arch, the back just comes straight down to a very small male posterior, no pelvic tilt. Quite a bulky skull there. Here, Amelia is tilting her pelvis forward again. You can also tell she's got her legs stood quite far apart, and then she's leaning her pelvis, the lower part of her back, forward. as she often does when she's standing around. But even in that pose, you can still follow there's more of a curve to the spine on her. Starts right here, goes both directions. More on her than there was on Maisie. See here, again, really wide, square shoulders on such a small person. Definitely wider than the hips. There's this small pelvis in here. This is a male Q angle. The legs are walking more side by side. And here, intentionally doing that catwalk, they have to angle the whole leg inward. Pull the knee right in front of the other one, unlike in women where you step your leg forward and it goes one in front of the other. But on the MTFs they have to intentionally angle the knee inward to get this kind of appearance. They push out the hip that's walking forward and then cross the legs one in front of the other, and it results in a much more straight appearance on this side, but we can't really see that thanks to the wardrobe. But when she's not doing the catwalk, it's very obvious that the legs are straight. The inner part of the thigh is extremely straight. There's no curving on the knee. So despite there being some curve right on the outside of the hips here, it's not at a skeletal level. They've managed to achieve something of an hourglass shape on some of the modern ones, but the pelvis is still narrower than the shoulders. Check out what the actual pelvis is inside there. And then see how much wider the shoulders are. See also here that the widest point of the hips appears to be above the crotch. It's right here. Down here there's not any width, it's just, you can see the Q angle begins high from that wide point, and the legs are straight. This really doesn't look like a girl's face to me at all. And without the hair, yeah, this honestly looks like a boy with long hair in a girl's uniform. These are straight male legs. These are wider male shoulders. There's also no need for this person to be holding the arms out way to the side like he is. The arms wouldn't bump the hips if he wasn't. You could put them straight down beside, and there's plenty of space there. Square shoulders, just overall a very square male appearance. On the other hand, see how even when real female legs are spread apart in a pose like this, on a real female you can still discern that there is curve to the thighs on both sides. Maisie's shoulders are just too big, too wide compared to the hips, even though there is an hourglass figure. The torso appears to be too long as well. It's a very long torso. Corset training can achieve this kind of figure, as can selective liposculpture, taking fat from certain areas and injecting it into others. See how long this ribcage looks? It's a very kind of long torso. The waist looks a little bit too low, even though yes, it is above the navel. But this is an unnatural look, and it may be a result of corset training or of some other techniques that we're not aware of. See how straight the inner thighs are, and then a sudden bulge down here at the lower part of the thigh. Instead of a gradual curve from the waist and downward, it comes in like this, then it's kind of square, and then suddenly down low here, under the natural shape of the pelvis, there's suddenly that curve that they put in there to make it look like there's more female Q angle. It just looks off. I think this body would fool the untrained eye, but it looks off. Look at that totally straight back. This person is straight as a pole. Also, women can develop muscle, but it generally doesn't look quite so knotted and bulgy as you've got down here. This person has male levels of subcutaneous body fat. Note how big this ribcage is. It's really, really big in here. And how broad and square the shoulders are compared to the hips. The mass is all up here at the top. There's a male taper to this body, and at a similar angle, note how the mass of Amelia is all in her hips, down low. It's the opposite of Maisie, whose chest was up at the chest and shoulders. And again, a totally boxy male body, with a flat male back and no pelvic tilt. Simultaneously soft but muscular, and yet the subcutaneous fat levels and fat distribution don't look the same as on a woman. This is one of the modern prepubescent MTF kind of looks. Compare that to the obvious spinal arch and pelvic tilt. This person is biologically female, and this person isn't. Both of these people have broad shoulders and rib cages, big upper bodies. They're kind of knobbier, boy-looking knees. Seems both of them have that kind of look. arms hanging straight down, long neck. And Sophie Turner's back is as straight as Maisie's. These are long, long arms here. Now, taller people do have longer arms, but males also have longer arms than females. There's no pelvic tilt on this person either. Compare to the curve of Amelia's spine, seen at all angles. The energy in this person is very focused and has that kind of ferocious look. The face is broad, the features are all strong, maybe the nose has been refined a little bit. It looks like probably there were some lip injections, there's some strange looking kind of bulging here. I think the lips naturally would have been thinner. The eyes are quite wide spaced, just the face is quite broad across. And the neck looks pretty thick, the shoulders look wide and pretty square. I do think we could fit 3 skulls on these shoulders. Now this body could fool the untrained eye too. Just like on Maisie Williams and Rose Leslie, there's a part on the side of these legs that doesn't look quite natural to me. The legs are stepping side by side rather than one in front of the other. The inner part of the thighs looks very straight, and the pelvis above this suddenly bulging part is significantly narrower than the shoulders. Yes, there's a waist indentation. The arms are swinging out to the sides, but they actually don't need to. The hips aren't quite wide enough for that. The rib cage looks really huge, really big. If one imagines filling in the waist, just go like this, fill in the waist, and that's suddenly a square male torso, which is smaller than the wider male shoulders. And then if you remove what looks like fake contoured fat right here, on the edges of the body, maybe it's contoured, maybe it's developed through estrogen, then the body suddenly looks entirely male, with a hip to shoulder ratio. And compare Amelia with the narrower shoulders, natural mass at the hips, curve visible on the thighs, gradual curves all along here, not a boxy shape and then a sudden right down here bulge, but it's all the way through. Sophie's shoulders could definitely support 3 head widths, and the neck is really long too. It's a really long neck. She's crossing the legs, but the one behind that isn't being held at as much of a slant, on that one the Q angle does look male. It begins high, and it's just very straight. The arms held right at the sides hang straight down, because the shoulders are wider than the hips. Those are male shoulders. On Sophie, that is. Sophie's boyfriend here is obviously FTM. This person has wide, curvy hips, curvy thighs, sloped shoulders. Sophie's waist is cinched in, yes, but the pelvis here is just too narrow for childbearing, and that means the person is male. The thighs here suddenly lack that curve on the outer edges and are clearly straight male thighs. The dimensions on Sophie are very male here. Sophie's legs are very male, stepping side by side. Shoulders are huge. Boyfriend has curvy female thighs with a female Q angle. You can see it on the inside here, you can see it on the outside. The FTM is stepping with feet closer together on the ground, while the MTF is stepping with feet farther apart like a man. The FTM's arms angle out. The MTFs hang straight down. The FTM has a short torso and a curve to the spine, accentuated by Sophie's hand. Again, that fake bulge right here that suddenly appears on Sophie after the narrow male pelvis. See the angle of her foot as she steps? Like I pointed out on Rose Leslie before, the foot has to angle outward, the knee has to angle inward, they turn the whole leg inward this direction, and they moved across the knees one in front of the other to fool people's eyes into thinking there's a female Q angle. There's not. There is one on the boyfriend, however, and it's visible despite the kind of baggy trousers. The widest point of the boyfriend's hips is just below the crotch there, like it should be on a female. The feet are walking straight. See, there's no tilting, there's no bending, there's no angling of the leg, the knee, and yet the Q angle is acute and the feet are naturally close together. On Sophie, we have here the Adonis belt. We have the big rib cage. We have the long arms, the long, lean legs, no pelvic tilt, totally straight back, male posterior. Now in this pose we can still tell that Amelia's back curves. On the other hand, you can follow the line along here, see where the ribcage comes in at the high point of the waist, see that it curves back out. Even when kind of holding the back in a position where it minimizes the appearance of the curve, you can still see it. You can see there's the curve to the abdomen, the ribcage is smaller, but on MTFs they lack that high point and they just don't have that spinal arch naturally. On Amelia you can see more natural curve to the legs, as well as on her arms, which are being scrunched up in this pose. Again, compare different looks of those two bodies. And when standing straight, not stretching out the spine like in the last shot, you can again see this dual curve to the spine, which was notably absent on Sophie. See how it just abruptly cuts in right under the long ribcage? Natural women don't tend to have such sudden chops and bulges in their figures. It's kind of odd. Note how narrow and square the hips on the left look, while on the right there's that odd flesh bulging and expanding the apparent shape. But we can't see the markers of where any bones in there are, like we can on natural women of this body size. A slim woman, you would be able to tell where her bones are inside of here. But on this person, nope, you just see this kind of bulge. The odd flesh that bends outward below the hips, not roundness and curve gradually from the high waist point outward and downward like on a real woman. The legs are straight. The back is straight. Shoulders are huge. Upper body is where all the mass is, compared to Amelia. Gradual curves from a high waist point, smoothly, roundly curving down all the way to the knees. Remember Maisie Williams' calf muscles? Yeah, this is what calf muscles look like on women, on the other hand. We can make out the points of her hips, where the thigh bones are connecting in with the pelvis. On real women, there is substance beneath the curve. It's not just injected on top of far thinner bones, it surrounds the bones, as would be expected. As the elite improve the contouring techniques they use, it's important to learn to recognize these differences and sense when there's substance beneath the curve. And I'll finish this off with a reminder that the elite love to warp gender perceptions, and they use all their puppets to do it. The gender-inverted majority of the modern media are mixed in with real males and females to incite greater confusion. They'll do photo shoots of women to try to make them look masculine, they'll encourage effeminate behavior in males, they do makeup jobs to intensify male traits in the female face. Relearning about skeletal anatomy, which is distinctly different between the two genders, and also relearning to recognize the different energy of the two genders is very important. Amelia has big eyes, great for the big screen, and certainly one physical feature that determined her success in an insanely competitive field, and a trait that is usually more masculine. However, even with those large eyes and the way they're focused on the camera, they're obviously mild in energy, not focused and intense in energy like we find in males. It's really important to learn to kind of recognize this in people around you and learn to understand that there is a distinct different energy between the two, because as they keep getting better at their techniques, the body becomes harder and harder for people to figure out, but the eyes don't lie. This is a woman, as I've shown through various shots of her, and comparisons of several examples of MTFs, a real male and an FTM. And last of all, this is Amelia with her godson. Those who are familiar with my videos know that I've spoken of the female instinctive drive to nurture and a specific energy women exude when with children. Males have a different energy and also have an important role for guiding, teaching, and caring for children. But in females, it's the primary biological design and a key part of female nature. Females tend to light up and open up when they're with children because, like it or not, it's a core part of female biology to bear and nurture children. It's part of the identity of our eternal spirits, and it shows. It's showing here. My opinion on these Game of Thrones actors is that Emilia Clarke is a woman, Jason Momoa is a man, and all the others I've shown appear gender inverted. And that's that.